Okay, well, welcome everybody to our annual community meeting for wards 7 and 8. Councillor Lehman and I have done this for a few years, doing a joint ward meeting, which we have found to work quite well to bring the folks in the northwest corner of the city together. And we've got some great content for you today. We're going to have some greetings from other representatives of the Northwest at the federal and provincial level. We're going to have a staff presentation, and a budget chair, Pelosa, has joined us today too. We'll be doing that full presentation on our 2022 budget update, of which we are right in the middle of getting public feedback on before council debates it. There'll be a presentation on upgrades to the Oak Ridge Optimist Park, which is a major park in the northwest of our city. Councillor Lehman and I will then be giving some general updates around our wards about issues of significance, and this will cover all of those questions that have come in ahead of time that we asked for you to submit if you've done that already. Then we'll do a general Q&A for other things that we may not have got through to the presentations or through our general ward updates, and at that point, everybody will be able to fire the questions off that perhaps weren't covered today or that are burning topics on your mind. And what we'll ask on that piece is just to be respectful that if it is a very specific question about something on your street, that's something that we can deal with as a one-off or directly one-on-one. If it is a question of general interest to this part of the city, that's a great question to ask for everybody to hear the answer to. We want to be respectful of everyone's time today. We will be explaining how you can ask your questions when we get to those sections of the meeting, because there'll be a little bit of a different process. Right now, everybody will notice that everybody is muted and you don't have the ability to unmute yourself. But when we get to those sections of the meeting where there's the possibility of participation, we'll either have you ask questions in the chat or we'll open up the mute and unmute function for general questions, depending on where we are. So that's kind of the game plan and the agenda for today. I don't know if Councillor Lehman wants to add anything before I invite some of our other elected officials to say some words, but Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Morgan. And thanks everyone for taking a little time out of your Saturdays. I know Saturdays are a precious time. And we appreciate you joining us today. And I also want to say thank you to MP Franciscatos, MP Cabega, MPP Sattler, and our budget chair Pelosa for taking time out of their day as well to join us, because everyone has very busy schedules. But you're being here means a lot to us. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. And back to you, Deputy Mayor.
All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to MP Peter Franciscatos to say a few words, and I'll hand it over to you, Peter.
Well, thanks very much, Deputy Mayor, and Councillor Lehman as well. I've taken part in this annual meeting in the past, invited to do so then and invited again. It's appreciated. It offers an opportunity to understand some of the local issues that folks are facing, and also actions and initiatives that councillors are carrying out, in addition to initiatives of the city administration generally. So no, I always treat it as a learning opportunity. If there are questions on federal issues, I am here and happy to answer those. But first and foremost, I'm here to listen, as I said, learn, and again, truly appreciate this engagement. Kudos to Councillor Lehman and to Deputy Mayor Morgan for finding ways during the pandemic repeatedly to engage their constituents. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Peter. And now I want to turn it over to our newest member of Parliament for London West, MP Ariel Kayabaga.
Thank you, Josh, Deputy Mayor Morgan and Councillor Lehman. So good to be here again with you guys, as we have been colleagues for the last 3 years, and very happy to see Amanda. Amanda was also one of the staff that supported me as a city councillor, and all the other staff on the call today. So very happy to see you. Thanks for having me. I am Ariel Kayabaga, your newly elected member of Parliament for London West. Many of you in Ward 7, and also, sorry, my apologies, good to see MPP Sattler and Councillor Pelosa. Thanks for being here as well. I am coming in the capacity as your MP for London West. Many of you are located in London West, and looking forward to connect. I'll leave my comments, my contact in the chat box before I head out. I'm very excited to see this continue and get to know all of you through your city councillors who are my colleagues. I have discussed with Deputy Mayor Morgan so much about some of the issues that matter to Ward 7, and looking forward to connecting with Councillor Lehman as well. And I am your resource as well, so please connect with me if there's any issue that we can support you on. I think that in order to have a successful government is to work with all levels of governments. And as a past city councillor, I can carry your issues at the federal level very strongly, because I have served as a city council in the last couple of years, and fully aware of some of the most important and pressing issues in our city right now. And we ran a very progressive platform that spoke to a lot of people in London West. I knocked on many of you's doors who told me some of the most important and pressing issues, such as climate change, housing, $10 childcare. And as I continue to knock on your doors, I'm sure at some point you'll see me in front of your door, because I do continue to do that. We'll continue to hear some of the most pressing issues for you. And like my colleague, Peter Fragiscatos, I am here to listen and to work for you. So please feel free to reach out. So thanks for having me, and I'm excited to be here.
Great, thank you to both of our MPs for the Northwest. And now I'll turn it over to our MPP, Peggy Sattler.
Thank you very much, Deputy Morgan and Councillor Lehman, for allowing me to, or inviting me to join the meeting today. Really pleased to be here along with my London West federal counterpart, MP Kayabaga, as well as MP Fragiscatos. Certainly, as a provincial representative, I value the close working relationship with the local councillors who represent areas of London West. We have a lot of shared concerns and priorities. Ariel mentioned many of them. Housing is a huge issue, both locally and provincially. I know London families who are paying an average of $15,000 a year for infant childcare are anxious to see that $10 a day childcare deal signed, and that is very much a local issue. Schools, I met with the Thames Valley District School Board yesterday and talked about the need for 2 new schools in Northwest London. The supports that have been put in place to keep our small businesses afloat is critical, and the information I get from the Hyde Park BIA and also the local councillors about the needs of the small business community is very helpful for me to be an effective advocate on behalf of small businesses. Anti-racism and Islamophobia. I don't have to say more about the horror that your area of the city has gone through, which was shocking for all of us in London and across the province. But there is certainly a need for provincial support for local initiatives to address that. Climate change, the City of London's climate emergency, and efforts that the province can take to help deal with climate crisis, and of course public health, and ensuring that there's strong public health infrastructure. And kudos to the work of the City of London in implementing the public health measures that have been implemented by the province. So looking forward to hearing comments, and yeah, thank you for bringing people together in this way, Councillor Lehman and Morgan.
Yeah, thanks to all of the speakers. As you can see, there's a lot of crossover in the work that the different levels of government do, and so it's great to have our representatives beyond the municipal level here today. And certainly we know that they are busy. So if you have to go, by all means, if something comes up, provincial or federal in nature, Amanda will make sure we've got it all jotted down, and we'll connect you with the relevant constituents. So with that, it is time to get into the core content of the meeting today. and to introduce our finance staff and the 2022 budget update, I want to pass it over to our council budget chair, Councillor Elizabeth Pelosa, to say a few words of welcome in and about the budget process, and then our finance staff will take over and provide a presentation. So, Budget Chair Pelosa, do you want to say a few words?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Morgan and Councillor Lehman, for inviting me into your ward meeting for the budget today. As City Budget Chair, it's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to present to you today the hard work staff has been doing over the summer. This was their summer vacation, bringing this budget update to you, recognizing it's a multi-year budget set by council back in the beginning in 2019. So this is what's before you for 2022. Mr. Murray will walk you through the process and the decision points, but there is a public participation meeting still coming up for Londoners to have their say, with the final vote of council on hopefully just one day on December 2nd. So it's my pleasure to take questions and comments through email later if you need anything specific in addition to staff's, but Mr. Kyle Murray is with us today to take you through the decision that are before us and the budget presentation in advance of your conversations with your councillors, Councillor Morgan and Councillor Lehman. So thank you for this opportunity, and to all those constituents who cared enough to be here and to have their input on the city budget, as it's really vital to the city. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Murray, that's over to you to take it away for the presentation. And I know we can get some slides up on the screen so everybody can have a bit of a visual. And I do believe there's one person calling in, and so we apologize. You won't obviously be able to see the slides today, but if you're interested in a copy, please email Councillor Lehman or I, and we'll make sure that you can get a copy of those slides that were presented today. And our apologies for not being able to follow along. It's a limitation of the visual and the audio process. So, Mr. Murray, though, I'll hand it over to you.
No, that's great. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Morgan. Thank you, Councillor Lehman, for having us today, and to Budget Chair Pelosa as well. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. It's always a pleasure to be here and to chat with the residents of Wards 7 and 8. This has been a few years now that I've had the privilege of attending this meeting, so it's always a good discussion and an opportunity to update all of you on the budget process each year. So I do have a few slides I'll walk through today. And certainly we'll aim to save plenty of time for questions as well. So our budget document was tabled last week on November 9th. So it is accessible up on our website at london.ca/budget. If you haven't already had the opportunity to go and check it out, I would certainly encourage you to do so. For those who are frequent watchers of the city budget process, you'll note this year that the budget document is all in one document. In previous years, we've had multiple documents for our property tax supported budget and our water and wastewater budgets, but you'll find it all in one place this year. So hopefully that makes it a little easier to find the information that you're looking for. So again, london.ca/budget if you're looking to access our budget document. So this slide's just, I guess, a bit of a visual representation of our budget process. And so the 2022 budget update is our second annual update to our 2020 to 2023 multi-year budget. And really, this is council's opportunity or chance to make course corrections within the multi-year budget process. We chuckle a little bit because our multi-year budget was approved on March 2nd, 2020, and about 2 weeks later, of course, locally, all the public health restrictions for COVID kicked in. So it just goes to show that things can and do change quickly. So it's really important to have a robust annual update process within our multi-year budget cycle to address things that need to change as we progress through the cycle. So as a reminder, typically what you see in an annual budget update are budget amendments that fall into one of three categories as a general rule. Typically, it could be a new or changed regulation that's impacting the city. It could be a new council direction that has emerged since we first approved the multi-year budget. or it could be an unanticipated cost or revenue driver that has changed or materially impacted us more than we expected that it would. So those are typically the nature of the changes that you see during an annual budget update process. Before we get into the details of this year's budget, I wanted to provide a little bit of context for property taxes here in London. So this slide provides a bit of a graphical representation of average residential property taxes across the province. And this is for municipalities with populations over 100,000 people. And I will caution that this is 2020 data. We do not yet have 2021 data. I expect we'll be getting that within the next month or so. But at least this will give you a kind of a sense of where we do rank relative to other larger Ontario municipalities. So on the residential side, London is the green bar that you see on screen. The average residential property taxes in London is $3,262. And the average for the municipalities with populations over 100,000 is the red bar, and that's 4,337 per year. So I think relative to the average, London does compare quite favorably. This is a similar type of story for the commercial category of property taxes, and specifically for prime location commercial office space. So you see London, the green bar at $3.12 per square foot, and the average across the province is the red bar at $3.69 a square foot. So again, very, very close to the bottom here in London, and certainly well below the average for the province. And finally, this is the industrial property tax picture. So this is for smaller industrial property under 125,000 square feet. That's newer design or newer construction. So again, London is third from the bottom at $1.48 per square foot, and the average for those other municipalities is $2.11. So again, quite favorable position here in London. So I hope that provides a little bit of context. It's something that we just like to show every year, just to kind of provide some general context in terms of how we compare. Another reminder as we head into another budget season that we like to provide is a quick discussion on tax policy as well, because it's something that is often confusing or not well understood. So I think it's worth reiterating, even though it's not necessarily directly related to the budget. So there are a number of factors that go into determining the tax levy increase for any given property in the city, but only two of those are within the city's direct control. Those being the council approved budget increase, which is what we obviously deal with through the budget process, as well as the council approved tax policy, which is dealt with separately after the budget process. So that typically happens in the spring. So that'll be coming up in a few months' time. The pieces or variables that are outside of the city's control include education tax policy, which is a provincial mandate, any changes in assessed values of properties. And it's, I think, important to note as well that the city does not assess properties. That's the responsibility of the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, which is a completely independent, not-for-profit company. And finally, there could be other provincial legislation changes as well that could impact local property taxes here in London too. I think the important point here that I'll really try to drive home is that we often hear that increases in assessed value automatically mean that a person's property taxes are going up, and it's a common misconception that often comes up, and it's not at all true. Basically, how it works is only if the assessed value of your property at the time of a reassessment increases to a greater degree than the class average, you would see in that case an increase in your property taxes. Conversely, if your assessed value increases less than the class average, then you would see a lower property tax increase. So it's really a relative process, and really depends on how your assessed value changes compared to everyone else's assessed value in that category. So it's a common misconception that we often hear, and it's something I think that we like to clarify as often as we can. To help, I guess, understand the distinction between the two factors that are directly within the city's control, I think this slide tells the story quite well. And so you can think of the budget process as deciding how big of a pie you're going to make. It really sets the size of the overall funding requirement. On the flip side, you can think of tax policy as how you're going to then slice that pie, and that pie would need to be sliced between residential property, the property class, the multi-residential property class, commercial class, industrial class, and so on. So hopefully that provides a little graphical sense of the difference between the budget process and the tax policy discussion, which happens subsequent to the budget process. So let's get into this year's budget update. So there are 12 property tax budget amendments in the 2022 budget update. 8 of them are operating budget amendments, and 4 of them are capital budget amendments. Of the 8 operating budget amendments, 1 relates to an increase in the budget, 6 result in budget reductions, and 1 has no impact on the overall property tax levy. And then on the capital side, none of the 4 capital budget amendments impact the tax levy in this multi-year budget cycle. So if all 12 amendments are approved, the 2022 tax levy increase will be reduced to 2.8% from the previous 3.8%. So a reduction of 1 full percent. And on a 4-year basis, you can see that there the orange dotted line on the slide. The 4-year average increase will be reduced from 3.8% to 3.6%. In terms of the average property owner impact, that gets reduced from an average of $113 per year to $109 per year if all amendments are approved. Specifically for 2022, the impact to the average residential property owner would be reduced from $117 to an increase of $85. So in terms of the specific budget amendments that council will be working through this year, so property tax budget amendment number 1 is really about the results of zero-based reviews and budget right-sizing work that civic administration has been working on over the course of the past year. So we are very committed to ensuring that we deliver our services as efficiently and as cost effectively as we possibly can. So we're always reviewing our budgets to make sure that our budgets align with the service levels that we're delivering and the resources required for those service levels. So through the work we've done over the course of the past year, we've identified $3.7 million of reductions in 2022, and then approximately $3.3 million of permanent reductions thereafter. I think the important thing to note on this budget amendment is that this does not have any impact whatsoever on service levels. This is about right-sizing our budgets to the service levels that we're providing. Budget amendment number 2 is the 1 budget increase that I alluded to before, and this relates to the Middlesex London Health Unit. So through the Health Unit's 2021 budget process, they identified that they had a budget pressure of approximately $762,000, and our share of that increase is approximately $640,000. Because the timing of the health unit budget process occurs later than the city's budget process, This wasn't something that was picked up in our budget process last year, so we now need to capture that as part of our 2022 budget update. Budget amendment number 3 is a one-time $850,000 request from RBC Place London. You might also know them as the London Convention Center. Obviously, as we all know, we're still in the thick of things as it relates to COVID, and certainly while things are slowly returning to normal, large-scale events are still not there yet. So RBC Place anticipates that they're going to require $850,000 to get them through at least the first few months of 2022. And hopefully by the time we get to the later part of the year, they'll be in a spot where they are more self-sufficient. So this is a one-time request, and we're suggesting that we fund this from our operating budget contingency reserve. So that would mean no impact at all to our property tax increase. Budget amendment number 4 relates to the private parking enforcement program, which is a service that we provide to private property owners in relation to unauthorized parking. So based on a review that's been conducted, it's believed that it would be appropriate to increase the fine for this program from $45 to $60. So obviously the goal of this increase is not to generate budget savings. It's more about increasing the deterrent for unauthorized parking on private property, but it does, I guess, inadvertently have a minor $100,000 reduction to our budget. Budget amendment number 5 is, again, a one-time, one-year reduction to our budget of approximately $2.8 million. So council approved some additional investments in both childcare and Ontario Works as part of the multi-year budget. But because of COVID, through last year's 2021 budget update, a one-year deferral was done because these initiatives just simply couldn't progress as hoped due to COVID. We are suggesting a further one-year deferral through the 2022 budget process. As it relates to childcare specifically, the investment was intended to fund new childcare spaces or the operating costs associated with those new childcare spaces. And unfortunately, those spaces won't be ready until late 2022. So we won't require this funding for the upcoming year. Similarly, on the Ontario Works side, as many of you know, there have been significant federal benefits provided for those who have found themselves out of work during COVID, and those benefits have really resulted in our Ontario Works caseload being much lower than it typically would be. And of course, those benefits are likely to wind down over time, but we anticipate the increase in our caseload for Ontario Works gradually recovering. So there's funding in Ontario Works that we don't anticipate we will require for 2022. Budget amendment number 6 was brought forward in recognition of the significant property tax increase that we were facing for 2022. So this is a two-parter, and it relates to a pair of reductions to additional investments that council approved through the multi-year budget. So the first part is a $600,000 proposed reduction to our infrastructure gap reserve fund contribution. So this is setting aside money essentially for future life cycle renewal of our infrastructure. And the second part of the amendment is a $50,000 reduction to our community buildings projects under our CIP areas. So a fairly minor reduction as part of the second part of Amendment 6. So Amendments 7 and 8 are amendments that Civic Administration has also put forward for Council's consideration this year, recognizing the tax levy increase that we were facing heading into this year. So Amendment 7 is an opportunity, should Council choose to support it, to further reduce the tax levy increase. And it's a three-part amendment. Part one is a proposed 50% reduction to our neighborhood decision-making program. That's $125,000 worth of a reduction. Part two is a 50% reduction to our neighborhood small events fund. That's a $10,000 reduction. And part three is a $100,000 reduction to our athletic travel grants program that's available to amateur athletes. So again, should council choose to support these reductions, they would alleviate some of the pressure on our tax levy increase for this year. Similarly, for budget amendment number 8, it's a two-part amendment, and again brought forward to help address the tax levy pressure for this year. Part one reflects reduced grass cutting in certain portions of our city parks. So essentially, we'd see those areas of those parks become more naturalized, I guess, is the best way to think about it. That would result in approximately $150,000 reduction. And then part two is a $100,000 reduction to our proactive tree trimming budget. So this is not in relation to trimming of hazard trees or responding to, for example, limbs that have fallen during storm events. This is about a minor reduction to our proactive tree trimming budget that we anticipate wouldn't have a resident safety impact. Budget amendment number 9 is the start of our capital budget amendments. And as I mentioned, there are 4 of them. I'll quickly go through them simply because they don't, none of them have a tax levy impact, but I will just touch briefly on each of them. So Amendment 9 is being brought forward in direct response to direction from council from earlier this year. And it's to secure additional funding for the next 3 years for our invasive plant management strategy. So that's $375,000 per year over the next 3 years. Budget amendment number 10 is adjusting the budgets for a series of transportation capital projects, specifically as it relates to Sunningdale, Southdale, and Bourncliffe projects that are coming up in the next few years. We're now at a point where we have better information in terms of the scope and cost of these projects. So we taken this opportunity to make the necessary adjustments to our capital budgets. Budget amendment number 11 is in relation to the expansion of our W12A landfill. So now that we've identified what the preferred expansion option is for our landfill, we're able to adjust our capital budget accordingly. So in the next few years, you see an increase of approximately 10 million, but what you don't see here on the slide is reductions beyond the 2029 period to our capital plan. So on a net basis, actually the budget for this capital project is actually being reduced by about $8 million. So that's, I think, a good news story overall. The final property tax budget amendment is number 12. It's to secure funding for the initial implementation of London Transit's zero emission bus strategy. So I will note that this is very early days on this strategy. There still is uncertainty in terms of what the ultimate cost of this initiative will be, but this amendment is looking to secure funding to move forward with the initial phase of this implementation. We are hoping that we are able to tap into the Infrastructure Canada Zero Emissions Transit Fund in order to secure funding for at least a portion of this project. I'll touch briefly, very, very briefly, on the water and wastewater budget amendments in this year's budget process. So there are 2 water amendments. Both of them are capital budget amendments, and both of them are strictly relating to deferring projects for 1 year, either to better align with other projects that are happening in 2023, or to allow us some time to complete background work that's necessary in order to move forward with these projects. So neither of these amendments have any impact on the previously approved water rate increases for 2022 or 2023. Those are both still planned to go up by 2.5% each year. Specifically, as it relates to wastewater, there's 1 budget amendment in this year's budget, but it's a 2-parter. So the first part of the amendment is, I think, a really good news story in the sense that we've been able to implement a number of energy efficiency improvements at our wastewater treatment plants in recent years. So we've been able to identify some savings in our utility budgets, and we're suggesting that those savings be repurposed into a new capital program that will provide funding in order to address sewage bypasses or overflows at our pollution control plants. So you may hear in the news that during significant storms, sometimes some sewage ends up being bypassed at our pollution control plants. This would be funding that we could use for projects that will help address that problem forward. Again, this amendment does not have any impact on the previously approved wastewater rate increases as well. So just quickly in terms of where we head from here in the budget process. So the next major milestone is our public participation meeting on November 29th. That's at the Strategic Priorities and Policy Committee. That starts at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Certainly encourage you, if you're interested in doing so, in either attending to provide your verbal submission, or alternatively provide written comments. You can do that as well. So certainly encourage you to provide your feedback at the PPM. As the budget chair alluded to at the start of this discussion, we're deliberating the budget on December 2nd. We also have December 3rd available if we need it. And we're working towards final approval of the budget at council on December 21st. So in terms of how to provide feedback, or if you have any questions or you're looking for more information, I guess if specifically you have any questions, we, the budget team, are very, very happy to respond to any questions and to chat with any Londoners on the budget process. So the contact information is here on screen. Please do not hesitate to reach out at all with any questions you might have. budget@london.ca is certainly the easiest way to get in touch with us. There's lots of great resources as well on our london.ca/budget page, as well as the getinvolved.london.ca engagement portal. Lots of educational materials, background information on our budget process as well. So encourage you to check that out as well if you haven't already. In terms of providing your feedback, I mentioned the public participation meeting already. Certainly encourage you, if you're interested in providing your feedback, to attend the PPM. Otherwise, your other option is to connect with your respective councillor. So I know councillors Morgan and Lehman are very, very willing to chat with all of you and to get your feedback on the budget process. So certainly encourage you to reach out. Ultimately, these two guys are the decision makers. They're the ones that have to make the decisions on the budget. So I'm sure they'd be very, very happy to hear your input or feedback on any particular elements of the budget. So that's all I have for slides. What I'll do is I'll stop sharing, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. And I'll say, although you said Councillor Lehman and I were the decision makers, we have 13 other colleagues who get to weigh their opinion in as well. So we have to convince a few people before we can do anything. But you are correct. Feedback from our constituents is really important as we weigh those options and have the debates before us. I've got a couple of questions that have come in. I'm just going to throw them out to you. The first is, was it a strategic decision to have a tax rate in the lowest rank amongst peers? And is it achieving any specific goals?
No, so that was not by any means any intention of civic administration. I think, we recognize and we appreciate the financial challenges that many in the community have faced over the course of the past 18 months because of COVID. And certainly heading into 2022, we knew we were facing a fairly significant tax levy increase, not too far away from the 4% range. So, we knew we had to bring forward some options for council to consider to bring that tax levy increase down. Again, if council so chooses to. Council does ultimately need to approve all of those budget amendments that I walked you through, and they can choose to approve or not approve any individual one of them. So it's really about optionality and giving those choices to council in terms of what trade-offs they're comfortable making to achieve a tax levy that is comfortable in their view for the community.
Great. I see a comment on the budget, and maybe on that note, I will note Mr. Murray provided some of the feedback methods and information on where to get budget documents in the getinvolved.london.ca/budget link. I put that link in the chat, so you can just click on it. It'll open it up on the screen, and you'll get access to both Mr. Murray's presentation. It's not quite exactly the presentation today, but it's got very similar slides all the way through it. If others would like to ask a question, it's best to throw a question up in the chat. And I think there's another one here as a follow-up. It's a direct message to me, so I don't think everybody can see it, but let me ask it. If our rate increase lags others, are we falling behind our peers?
Well, I guess it's all, of course, relative, and certainly, I don't think we can look at that in isolation for one specific year. I think that's something that needs to be assessed over a number of years and an extended period of time. Again, I think it really comes down to choices and decisions. I mean, if council so chooses, they can elect to not approve any of those budget amendments, and we remain at a 3.8% increase for 2022. So, it's really a discussion that the council needs to have about where the priorities stand, I suppose.
I've got another question. There are increases planned for waste disposal. Are there plans to address the Manning Road waste smell coming from the dump as part of this budget?
It's a good question. I am not aware of anything specifically in this budget that is specifically to address that or in response to that. Certainly, if you're interested in learning more about that issue, though, I'd encourage you to reach out to our solid waste management team at City Hall, and they can certainly walk you through the initiatives that are either have taken place or are planned in the coming years in order to address that issue.
Yeah, and I'll also add there are a number of initiatives around the Manning Road waste site. And what I will do is, it was a direct message to me. I will connect with that individual and connect him with our staff in that area who can go over a number of programs that are at play. I know it was a question about this specific budget update, but there are certainly programs in place that are related to that site. So I will endeavor to do that. If there's any other questions, just throw them in the chat. I'm just going to say we are about to enter into what will be the phase of the budget process where we hear direct feedback at council, but that is just one way we receive direct feedback. Some of the comments today, the messages that you want to send in to Councillor Lehman and I, any messages you send in to budget@london.ca, those will all get to all of my colleagues on council before we actually debate the budget. So we are in a phase now where we're kind of listening. The table budget is out there. We've probably got lots of personal opinions on it, but we're holding back to hear what constituents say, what Londoners think. And so this is a really important phase of public engagement and feedback. So please do check out those budget documents. If there's something you're very passionate about as one of those budget amendments, let us know, because there's certainly some that I am, and I want to hear what you think as well. I would be very interested. Okay, all right. So I think that's good for this, knowing that again, if you didn't have a question you wanted to ask here, or something comes up later, there's certainly an opportunity still to ask lots of questions. We don't even have the public participation meeting for another, I think, 9 days or so. So there's lots of time to engage, lots of time to let this settle and think. And I want to say thank you so much to our budget chair, Elizabeth Pelosa, and our finance staff for taking some time today to lay out a lot of information for our constituents. And the last thing I'll say is, if you remember last year, I was the budget chair, And so I would have had probably a lot more to say about this, but since then, and I didn't realize this until today, I've become the deputy mayor since we've last had a meeting. And so that the budget chair position was passed along, and Councillor Pelosa has been doing an excellent job shepherding us through this process so far and working with our finance team. So I'm very excited to have an opportunity to maybe participate in the budget debate a little more, because when you chair the meeting, it's a little more difficult. So I'm very, very interested in your thoughts, because I certainly want to be an active representative of yours on the budget. And I know Councillor Lehman does too. With that, we will move to the next phase of our agenda, and I will turn it over to Councillor Lehman to introduce that section.
Great. Thank you, Josh, and thanks, everyone. I'll just reiterate what Josh said there. The most important thing for us as councillors when we are in budget deliberations is to hear from our constituents on what they are looking to see, or, you know, in terms of tax rates overall, or specific areas that they're concerned about. It really helps us come to an agreement of where the city should go. It's hard to believe that the Oak Ridge Optimist Park and the arena there was not in operation a very short time ago. Back in March 2020, when COVID first hit, that facility was taken over by the Middlesex London Health Centre to be used as the first COVID assessment centre in London. It was a crucial tool to use as we began our fight against this horrible pandemic. But it was for those that lived in the Northwest doing their part as well, as they've lost use of that facility for a considerable amount of time until finally reopening this past summer. You know, council wants to recognize the give back that you did to the community to keep us safe, by a small gesture of looking for improvements that perhaps we can do for this facility. So this is kind of the kickoff of finding out and hearing from people in the area what they would like to see as improvements, and what we can consider going forward in this area. So I'd like to welcome some staff here today that are going to talk about this further and kind of get this kick-started. We have Kristen Powell and Karen Oldham from our neighborhood services, Val Morgado from facilities, and Scott Stafford from parks. Like I said, this is going to be the beginning of getting feedback, and we'll be using our Get Involved London website to assist us as well as other forms of communication in the next coming months. So at this point, I'd like to turn over to Karen to kind of lead this discussion.
Great, thank you so much, Councillor Lehman. And I'm going to share my screen. So we've coined the term Oak Ridge Decides, which we've taken from the neighborhood decision-making program, actually, in hopes to engage with the Oak Ridge neighborhood around the kinds of things you might like to see for your neighborhood. So I guess this is a reminder that for 347 days, more than 85,000 people visited your neighborhood. There were lined up cars from dawn until dusk, and there was a council resolution recently to have us engage with you to find a way to thank you. So the Oak Ridge COVID-19 Assessment Center saw thousands of patients, most of them eventually getting a test, which really helped to alleviate the number of people that would have been landing on our emergency departments and urgent care centers to find out if they had COVID. So we really do appreciate that this was probably a bit of an inconvenience for you, those of you living in the direct routes to the assessment center. And really, we want to say thank you. So the Oak Ridge Decides, what is that exactly? Basically, we're going to kick off today an engagement process with you. And we're looking at any and all ideas that you may have for your neighborhood, very similar to neighborhood decision making. So if you're familiar with that, this is very similar to that. We are breaking this into 2 phases. The first phase will see a bunch of engagement tactics. So we're going to launch the Get Involved website page where people can submit ideas. We're hopeful that we'll be able to do some in-person workshops and pop-ups. We do have a mail-out invitation that's likely to go out in the next week to addresses in Oak Ridge that will ask people to please submit ideas. We'll take advantage of that nice sign in front of the Oak Ridge Arena, and also outreach emails to all of our different sort of groups, Facebook groups, etc., that we've put a list together and hope to be able to reach everybody in multiple different ways so that it's very accessible. In phase 2, we're looking for Oak Ridge residents only to vote. So in phase 1, anyone can submit an idea. So we may be getting ideas coming to us from across London, but in phase 2, we're opening up a vote just for the Oak Ridge residents. And based on the tactics you saw in the previous, if anyone has ideas to make on how we can make sure that we include everyone, please put that in the chat because we'd like to hear from you. So the timeline for this engagement, we're kicking this off today. Our Get Involved page will go live in the next day or so. And you have from now until January 17th to get us your ideas. From January 17th until the 31st, a couple of weeks, we'll be vetting all of the ideas to see if they're feasible. And those that are feasible, we'll basically be doing a similar thing again by putting those on a ballot and having people vote. We're going to leave the vote process itself open for a week, which is very different than the way we do neighborhood decision making, but we really want to make sure that we hear from everyone. Once we have the results of those votes, then sometime in spring, likely the end of March, we'll put those ideas with the most votes in front of council and have them help us choose those projects. So when you do go on the Get Involved site, we're going to be asking just a couple of questions. We don't need a lot of information. You'll have to register, so we'll by default get your contact information in case we need to call or email you about any questions we have about your idea. We will be looking for a description of your idea and the location of where you want your idea to go. And this piece is very important because in order for us to do the feasibility on it, we need to know where you're thinking of your idea to go. And then, of course, anything else you want to tell us. I will say that Oak Ridge Arena being the assessment center and right next door to the Oak Ridge Optimist Park, that park has a lot of stuff in it already. So we may be limited on sort of what will go in the park itself. So you can look to the other green spaces or other parts of your neighborhood for those ideas. So just to get you started, we've put some ideas together that hopefully will spark your interest or get you thinking about different ways, different improvements for your neighborhood. So these ideas will actually be put on the Get Involved site. So you don't have to madly write anything down here. This will all be included on the Get Involved site. And in each of these ideas, you'll see that there are things to consider, and those might be things that you want to include in your description of your idea. We also have a timeline because basically there are some things like a bike rack that as long as we can order that and get it in, that can happen very, very quickly. Whereas other ideas may take much longer. And if funding is quite large, then it could take several years. So that we have a solar powered e-bike charging station, which we do not have very many of those at all in London. But those of you who are energetic and environmentally conscious, this is a neat idea. Benches, and I will say that Oak Ridge did win in the neighborhood decision-making process some benches already, but benches are always a great addition to any neighborhood. Little libraries, which some of you may be familiar with, and we see those popping up all the time throughout London. A party in the park. We thought that this might be an idea as a thank you, is to throw a big celebration, and that could look like a concert. It could look like this picture with lots of blow-ups and carnival style, I guess. But a party in the park was what we thought might be a cool idea. Public ping pong table. So these are tables that are able to be out in the elements and year round would be available. People just have to bring the paddles and the ball. A community information board. So if you want to make sure people are receiving all of the great things that are happening in your community, one of the ideas would be to put up a bulletin board. A story stroll is new to London. We have a couple of them now, actually, where we would put different stories sort of as you walk along. You would read a sign similar to this and enjoy with your kids, or maybe be stories for older adults. So we could be quite creative with these. Accessible curb cuts. So in some of our older neighborhoods, we do have curbs which can be difficult for people, whether they're pushing a stroller or in a wheelchair. The curbs can be cumbersome. So this is another suggestion. An Oak Ridge neighborhood gateway, so signage saying, welcome to our neighborhood, welcome to Oak Ridge. Oak Ridge Street banners. So these are usually on light posts or something throughout the neighborhood so people know where they are. They would know they were in Oak Ridge. An outdoor chess table. Commemorative street signs. We do have a few areas in the city that have their name, and if there's a community association, potentially they would have their logo on the street sign as well. So this is something available. Tree planting, perhaps to green our city even more. Public art murals, and these can be on private property or public. It's a different process, but we're definitely willing to engage around sort of beautification as far as murals go. Community public art around wrapping our utility boxes, and those have really become quite popular. We have quite a few in London now. Pickleball, which is on the rise, and we just did engagement around this and know that Londoners are really keen to participate in this new sport. And we do have tennis courts in the Optimist Park, so potentially this may go in another park. Shade structure, so we do have the pool. This shade structure actually is right from the Oak Ridge Park, and we always hear from people that they would like more shade structures throughout our park systems. A digital marquee, again, sharing information and could also be a bit of a gateway. And then finally, the last idea was a canteen in the park. So a place for people to get drinks and popsicles, etc. in the summertime, I'm assuming, but maybe hot chocolate in the winter. So I will stop sharing my screen and happy to answer any questions. We also have Scott Stafford and Val Morgado available as well. They're more on our feasibility of side of things. So if there are questions, we're happy to address those now.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate good start and some really interesting ideas. We did have one question. You did describe the process, just not clear on the voting. Who will be able to vote for the Oak Ridge improvements? Will it just be residents of Oak Ridge?
It will just be residents of Oak Ridge, yeah. So we're gonna look at postal code as an identifier. So the postal code for Oak Ridge, those people will receive an invitation to vote, right, as a postcard to their homes, and then we'll have the way that they'll be able to vote listed on the postcard.
But everybody, and those, including those outside of Oak Ridge, will be allowed to put ideas forward that can be considered. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
Great. You talked a lot about improvements to the park. What about the arena? Will this cover potential improvements to the arena?
Potentially, absolutely. Those are welcome as well. So people can, if they know the arena well and see that there needs to be improvements, they can send those in as well, for sure.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just seeing if there are any other questions here from those attending. Just want to remind you that we are just starting this process. So you can go to Get Involved London website, or you can contact me directly, send me an email, and I'll make sure that your suggestion gets there. And the more choice we have, the better, to get the best possible good things for this park. And I just want to thank all those that live in around Oak Ridge for their sacrifice during the COVID time, because as was mentioned by Karen, there were some trying times. Especially there was that period, I think, when school started and there were cars lined up a couple of kilometers long, sneaking into neighborhoods while children walked to and from school daily, day in, day out. But we got through it, and with your help, we got through COVID. Well, we're getting through COVID, should I say. We still have a lot of work to do there, but boy, with your sacrifice there, the assessment centers, I believe we saved a lot of lives. So thank you again for your part in this role. I don't see any other questions here, so I just want to thank the staff for their time and putting this excellent program in place to allow us to get to some great things hopefully next summer. So thank you. So with that, I will turn it back to Deputy Mayor Morgan.
Yes, thanks, Steve, and thanks again to our staff for presenting today. I know this was the kickoff, so like was said, there's lots of time to think about some ideas and submit them in, and I think it'll be an exciting process. As for the next section, both Councillor Lehman and I are going to do some general updates in the ward, and I'll let you know that this is based on I mailed out a newsletter to I think every house in my ward, and in this we invited, if you have some questions or some priorities you'd like us to discuss at this ward meeting, let us know. And so I've put together just a list of things to provide some feedback and some updates on based on that, and I know Councillor Lehman has the same. And then just so you know how the rest of the agenda will go, at that time, we'll have a general Q&A. And if you have questions as either one of us are talking, just throw them into the chat and Amanda will watch them for us, and we could do a little bit of Q&A. Again, and from past feedback in our ward meetings, there are a number of people who would like to engage with their cameras on and microphones on, but they don't want to be recorded. So after we conclude our general ward updates, we'll kind of wrap up the formal part of the meeting and the recording, and then we'll turn on your microphones, and you can have any questions you like of a general nature to Councillor Lehman or I without it being recorded, because again, we want people to feel comfortable, and not everybody's comfortable asking a question on a video that's going to be posted later, because there's, as you saw, some great content today that other members of the community who couldn't participate today would like to see as well. So with that, I will start my general ward update. And before I do that, I know some of the staff will drop off now. So thank you for spending time on your Saturday with us and our constituents. We really appreciate it, and all the work to pull together the programs and the information. I speak for both Councillor Lehman and myself when I say thank you so much. It's really appreciated on behalf of the community. And Karen has put her information in the chat. If you have questions directly for her, you can catch her email there. So an update for some Ward 7 items. And I'll start off with Foxfield District Park, because it sounds very exciting about the things happening in Oak Ridge, but I thought, maybe we should cover some things happening up in the District Park in the north part of the Northwest. And I got some questions about that. So a couple of years back, council authorized a significant number of improvements to the Foxfield District Park, although a number of those improvements were delayed because of the pandemic. But the budget is still there, the authorization is still there, and we finally got to the point as we start to emerge from the supply chain issues and other constraints of being able to proceed with a number of improvements. So phase 2 of our improvements to Foxfield District Park, we are just hiring the consultant to do all of the design work on that phase. That phase will be constructed in 2022, and it includes a new spray pad, a field house with washrooms, and some other minor park upgrades within the budget that certainly we want to get feedback and consultation on. So as soon as we get the consultant hired, we are going to refine a conceptual plan and then engage with the community for public feedback over the winter months on those improvements to make sure that they are, to make any sort of adjustments or changes to them based on the needs of the community. As both Councillor Lehman and I, you've heard us talk about before, letting the community shape some of these improvements is really important to us. Like, it's the people using these spaces that really should help guide us on this. And so there will be an opportunity to engage on that conceptual design and move forward with those improvements. There will be a phase 3 to the improvements to Foxfield District Park, which will include a soccer field. That soccer field will be on a block of land the city owns on the far westerly portion of the property. But that will be probably the following year. There's some different grants that we've applied for to try to up kind of the base level improvement to that soccer field, and we're still proceeding through those. So we need to kind of let that come to fruition before we can actually do the design and the final work and bring it to fruition. So you'll see several improvements in 2022, and then a phase 3 in 2023. Then I have an update on neighborhood decision making. So much like Oak Ridge Decides, as many of you may be aware, we engaged in a citywide neighborhood decision making program, which includes the Northwest. I'm very passionate about neighborhood decision making. It was something I ran on in 2014. This is the part of the budget where we throw it out to the community to come up with ideas, vote on, and then we implement. So it's not the part of the budget that Councillor Lehman and I get to control or vote on. It's the part of the budget that the community gets to decide on. And I wanted to share a couple of stats about neighborhood decision making and just let you know the winning projects in the Northwest. There are 5 areas in the city. The Northwest is just one of them. But since its inception, neighborhood decision making has had citizens decide on about $1 million of improvements across the city to neighborhoods. That involved about 1,000 ideas generated from residents, and they voted on about 500 of them, because through the work of submission and the work of staff, sometimes ideas get amalgamated together or changed into something slightly different because of the feasibility. We had almost 55,000 votes cast for these neighborhood decision-making ideas over the course of the program, and including this year's winning ideas, about 70 ideas have come to fruition through this. So what were the winners in the Northwest in the most recent submission? The top vote getter, which will come, is an accessible playground addition at St. Catherine of Siena School, which is attached to Plane Tree Park. So it'll be an accessible playground that will be there for all to enjoy. There will be a community ice rink in Riverbend, which is part of the Northwest block of decision making. There will be a pollinator garden in Snake Creek, which is up my way, will be added. There will be new benches in the Oak Ridge area added in Councillor Lehman's ward. And there will be decorative garbage cans in Norwest Optimist Park, decorated by, I think, some local artists, was another successful submission. The way that it works is not all of those were the top vote getters, but there's so much budget for each area. So once the first project takes up a chunk of the budget, we go to the next highest vote getting project that is still within the budget on the list. So unfortunately, that means a couple of ideas in both Councillor Lehman's and my wards, which were well supported by the community, will not come to fruition simply because they were large budget items, and that's the way the program works. But I know that there are always ideas that, as you saw from the Oak Ridge Decides, that these neighborhood decision-making ideas that are well supported, sometimes they come to fruition anyways through other budgets, other processes. We've got a data bank of great ideas, and it's a great program. So there's an update on that. I think the rest of this is all related to traffic concerns, which comes as no surprise because it's a very common topic in our corner of the city. Wonderland and Eagle Trace traffic concerns. So there was an increase of volume at that intersection and along those roadways because of the closure of Hyde Park and Sunningdale, because of the roundabout construction. We have got some complaints about the need for a signalized intersection there. Our staff will be doing a study next year to examine the traffic patterns and see if it's warranted. If it's warranted, it'll go through the process of being installed. If it's not, then it will not be installed, and we will study it again sometime in the future. But staff have committed to doing a study on that, which is how transportation changes get made. There's a number of traffic calming surveys that have done. Our traffic calming policy involves residents putting together a petition. If there's enough individuals who sign that petition, then our staff do an analysis of the street. If the street qualifies for traffic calming, then there is a community vote of the impacted residents to put that traffic calming in. So there have been several community votes. That means they've gone through the petition process and the staff assessment and data gathering, and have gotten to the point of votes. And they include Blackacres Boulevard had a traffic calming survey that was successful. It will receive new speed humps, and those will go into the queue for the RFP and the construction season next year. Aldersbrook Road, actually east of Aldersbrook Gate, all the way to Wonderland, also had an assessment and a traffic calming survey done, and it was successful and will go into the same queue. Late last year and earlier this year, Aldersbrook Gate actually did the same process, and they received a speed hump based on the same community driven process. Advanced left turn signals. Fanshawe and Dalmagary. So you're driving along Fanshawe, you want to go to the Walmart, you want to jet in Dalmagary. We've got lots of questions about should that be an advanced left turn or not. Staff completed a study of that intersection earlier in November. The traffic did not meet the warrant. 23% of all traffic had to wait past the first light, but only 0.41, less than 1%, had to wait to the third light. To qualify for an advanced turn, you need about 10% of all traffic to have to get to that third iteration of the signal to meet the warrants. So that one did not meet the warrant yet, but we'll continue to monitor that. Fanshawe at Aldersbrook Gate, an advanced left turn there. We've studied two different directions there. The southbound turning lane was studied during rush hour and on the 26th of October, and only 2.9% had to wait past the first signalized light. No one had to wait past 2 cycles during the study, so that is not yet qualify. The westbound left turning lane at the same intersection was studied on November 9th, and 3.09% were were not able to clear after one cycle. No one had to wait for 2 cycles during the course of the study. So it is not even close to being warranted by the metrics yet. And the final one we studied, are going to study, is I've had a request for Fanshawe and Pinnacle, an advanced left turn off of Pinnacle. That study will happen next week. Those are the general updates that I received based on the questions that came in before. I certainly have lots more to talk about, but in the interest of time, I think what I'd like to do is turn it over to Councillor Lehman, let him do his ward update, and then I'll let you get some questions in later, and I can, if there's time at the end, roll back in with some other ward updates. But I certainly want to be conscious of the time and let Councillor Lehman have a turn too, and save some time for your questions. So with that, sorry if I talked fast, but happy to chat with anybody about any of those items anytime. Councillor Lehman, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Josh, so much. I'll try to talk as fast as you, because you're pretty get a lot in there. Yeah, so I'll be touching on very similar things. Neighborhood decision making is, I think, a lot of people don't really know about this program. So I'm glad Josh spoke about it. We were able to, through this, get approved for benches in Oak Ridge Crossings Park, Silversmiths Ponds, Beaverbrook Woods, and Capulet Park. Unfortunately, we didn't get an expansion in Beaverbrook Woods basketball court. It didn't get enough votes, quite frankly. But what I'd like you to do is to think about things that you'd like to see in the parks nearby and improvements in our area, and go to getinvolved.london.ca to begin that process. It's not too soon to start it now for next fall, to get your ideas, to get organized with folks in the neighborhood, that we can get those votes going, and reach out to me anytime to see how I can help to get a particular idea, get some traction and get going. There's some really interesting stuff that is done throughout the city. For example, a pollinator garden in Snake Creek, a musical playground at St. Robert's Public School, an outdoor ice rink in Talbot Park. So those are kind of some of the ideas that you can consider, and you can get all those again at getinvolved.london.ca to see what other areas of the city have done. Every year is a big year for construction. We saw great road improvements on Valletta, finally getting rid of the concrete slabs that vibrated all the houses for years. So I was glad to get that project done. It's fairly substantial, and we saw some sewer upgrades on St. Anthony and Tarbert. And I just want to kind of just run over the big projects on schedule for 2022 that we can expect. In this day of climate change and the sudden huge weather impacts that we're seeing, especially with rainfall, with London and being at the river, it's been on city staff's radar for some time. And a big project is the Mud Creek project that's going on right now. It's been going on for well over a year or so, and we're getting into phase 2. We're on the backside of this project, was just terrific, because as we all have seen in heavy rainfall, the tremendous flooding on Oxford and Wonderland, and with the potential to swamp our sanitation system and potential for releasing raw sewage into the Thames, which obviously we don't want. This is going to really enhance our stormwater management during those heavy rainwater events. You can kind of look through the fence and see the progress on this. If you go in Wonderland, just south of Oxford, on the east side, you can look down Mud Creek. Not the best name I know for a creek, but it's fairly substantial. And I think it's going to look really terrific once it's all done, once we get the replanting done of the trees that were there, and the natural nature paths that will come. So that will be a major project that will be happening next year. We're going to be getting some streetlights on Blythewood, We're going to be having the bridge at Buller Road, just going into Byron from Sanatorium, which I'm really happy that staff is looking at that, because on traffic increases, it's a bit of a bottleneck and excuse me, kind of creating an unsafe condition for cyclists and pedestrians just getting into Byron and to Springbank Park. So I'm really happy to be working with staff on this one to see if we can get a substantial upgrade to that bridge, because I really believe that the timing is right for this, and I've worked hard to get it included in the master mobility plan that will be coming to us shortly. On Riverside, I'm happy to have a pedestrian crossing going in there at Sunny Hill Ave. As we all know, speeds on certain streets can get quite dangerous, create a dangerous situation. We've tried various calming solutions and getting the police to enforce where possible, but with resources, we can't have a cop there all the time with a radar gun. So I'm happy to get this crossing to allow residents on the north side, I guess, of Riverside to cross the street there, and with kids going to school as well. That's crucial. Sarnia Road, we're getting a pathway completion finally from the complex on the north on Sarnia Road up into the Heritage Bridge there to Sandbar Street in Councillor or Deputy Mayor Morgan's ward. We also have a temporary stormwater pond in that area as well. It's called the Matthews Hall temporary facility. I don't know why it's called Matthews Hall. It has nothing to do with the school. And that's been a concern of people in the area because it, quite frankly, a very dangerous situation for kids doing what kids do, playing down by the water and with no fencing whatsoever to protect them. So I'm very happy to see the city acting on this and getting that facility out of there. Again, we're all aware of, all councillors are aware of the problem we have with cut through traffic that avoid busy intersections, and in Ward 8 we've got our share. So we're always working with staff and with constituents to find solutions to reduce that cut through traffic. I'm happy to say Royal York, while did not get traffic calming, it did through the traffic study. It didn't get the necessary numbers to get traffic calming, like speed bumps and narrowing, etc. But we are getting a three-way stop at Hunt Club in Royal York, and I think that's going to discourage, quite frankly, people cutting through that area to avoid the Hyde Park Oxford streetlight. Sanatorium Road, we're going to be getting we're looking at overhead lights for the pedestrian crossing there, as we've had concerns from the school there. That traffic is not heeding that. And of course, 40 km/h speed changes. Some of you have seen them in certain neighborhoods. They're coming. They're around schools, and staff are working their way through the city to get them implemented everywhere. Which I think everyone is happy to see. The last thing I'll touch on is the Gypsy Moth infestation. We've been battling that for a couple of years. I know folks have been going to great lengths to protect their trees, and thank you very much. It's spread up from Oak Ridge along the Thames. Now it's in the Hunt Club area. I'm hoping, and indications are that we're finally at the end of this cycle. But our urban forestry team with myself as well will be monitoring this very closely as we get into the spring season. So I'll sum it up. Thank you again for your forbearance as we try to get some traffic measures through, your patience and understanding, and as always, thank you so much for your feedback. It again helps me and Josh do our jobs for you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Josh.
All right, thanks. So at this time, I don't see any questions in the chat related to what we were on. So as I discussed, in a moment, we will stop the recording and open up microphones. You can turn on videos for those who have told us they prefer not to be recorded. I want to thank you for your participation today. And I'm going to have Amanda put up our contact information because it's a nice way to end the recorded section of the video, which we will post for the many constituents who are not able to tune in live, but will be very interested in the content. So if there's anything today that you have questions for Councillor Lehman or myself about, or if you heard a staff member speak and you couldn't remember their name and you want to connect with them, just give us a call, shoot us an email. You'll see well, Amanda's put up all of our information, including our cell numbers, so you have full access to us anytime. So send us a message, send us an email, give us a call, and we will do that. And before I stop the recording, I do want to, while the recording is on, say a very huge thank you to the administrative support for both Councillor Lehman and myself, Amanda. She has been on the call the whole time, and she really, stuff comes together because of the work she does. You get responses quick because of the work she does. When the times we look good, it's usually because of her. So let me say a very huge thank you to Amanda for supporting us today and every day, and the work that you do often when we are in meetings serving our constituents. It is greatly appreciated, and we can't possibly thank you enough. And with that, I think I will stop the recording and we will continue the meeting. But for those watching this after the fact and not live, again, our contact information is on the screen. Touch base with us on anything you heard today.